And we back.
Hey, hi Nance.
Hi, Bethy. We're back. We're back and we're pumped up.
Here we are. We're ready. This is a topic we've tossed around for a while.
Woo, this one hits close to home,
Hmm.
my friend.
Yeah.
How about if I tee it up?
Go ahead, do it. You go.
We're going to talk about tolerations. And this was a casual statement or word that Beth dropped months ago in a conversation. And as usual, she had this golden nugget and it was about tolerations. What are you tolerating? So the topic is when tolerations become troublesome and big problems, and when tolerations become limitations. So, anything to add there, Beth?
So I think, it's funny. I went to do some research about this, and all that kept coming up was definitions and, tolerance versus tolerant and all this stuff, and not in the way that we have chatted about it. So I heard this term years ago from a writer I knew. She was a writing for magazines at the time. She was a writing instructor. Now I think she's a writing coach. Her name is Linda Formicelli, wonderful human being and very talented writer. And she talked to us about tolerations and how they can be the smallest thing,
Mhm.
a light bulb that's out, but you pass it every day.
Yep.
And it takes up space,
Mhm.
it lowers your energy, and it's not I think when you have a really big toleration, that you have to address it because it's, like, right in front of your face. So it's like a boulder compared to, like, a grain of sand or a pebble, right? Like,
Mhm.
and they can range in size, but like anything else, a squeaky wheel gets the grease. So I think if there's a really big one, you almost can't avoid it, but the little ones, you're like, "I'll do that tomorrow, I'll do that tomorrow."
Love, love the definition. I have a personal example to share with it, and
Mhm,
then I want to share the big personal example, which is why I was like, "Whoa." So I've lost a lot of weight over the past several months, and I forgot this story, Beth, until I was replaying the message that I left for you in preparation for this. So, whatever. I've been up and down with my weight for years. So I was at the doctor, and she's like, "Okay, so this is now a problem." This was a while ago. This is last August, and I said, "What? I don't. What do you mean? It's like it's not a big deal. It's like a few pounds." She's like, "No, it's not." And your blood pressure is being affected, and I'm worried about your health. So what I realized was I had been tolerating these incremental little weight gains over the past year, maybe 4, 5 years. And when I looked back over the past 20 years, because I'll track my healthy habits and I'll track my eating habits sometimes, whatever, and I'll track my weight. It was it was fascinating. It was cyclical over the past 20 years.
mm.
And I had gotten used to gaining weight, so I had tolerated it. And this isn't about losing weight. This is about the ebbs and flows and what you tolerate and when you'll tolerate it. And you said, a little sand, right? A little grain of sand that becomes a pebble that becomes this big boulder. So this little toleration of a pound here or there, or oh, these pants don't fit, I'll just buy a bigger size, or whatever the case may be, became a significant problem. And my health was in jeopardy. And it took a doctor saying to me, "Time out, time out, time out, time out. You get to choose how you live, and I'm not telling you what to do. I'm telling you that you're gonna have to go on medication if you keep this up." And I was like, "Whoa." So that was a little irritation or a little toleration that I let build and build and build until it became a big problem. Thoughts on that? Beth, over to you, Beth.
I know somebody who I have watched do the same thing. And I have to say, I have never like struggled with my weight, but I'm always amazed when somebody says, "Oh, I gained 10 pounds or I gained 20 pounds." Because on my 5'3" frame, like to gain 10 pounds, I look like a different person. Right. So but I can see that. You're right. And these things that happen one little thing at a time. It's
Yeah.
almost like when you have a chair somewhere in your house conveniently placed, and one person throws their coat on it, right? And
Right,
then somebody else
right.
says, "Oh, I can throw my coat here." The next thing, there's 20 coats on the chair, and the coat hook is empty. But every time you pass the chair, you're like, "Oh my god, what's with the coats on the chair? We have a coat hook." And it's like, "Well, you started it." Like,
Right. You let it slide and let it
right,
slide and let it slide until
yeah,
right, right.
yeah, and it just mounts, right.
And I'm just thinking of this. We said in the beginning that it's when tolerations become limitations. So if you go back to the weight example, um, it became a limitation. It was limiting my desire to get on stage. It was limiting my desire to wear a bathing suit, like all that. These are very personal examples.
Yeah.
And when you think about it, it applies at work and at home, and particularly with your relationships, I would say,
Yes.
professional and personal. So let's jump into that pond, my friend.
Woo-hoo! That whole
We're
mess,
jumping in.
yeah.
We're jumping
Yeah,
in.
so I feel like this is a gray area for me. I feel like I jump into this little pond all the time where
Mhm.
someone who I love very dearly, which doesn't necessarily have to be one specific person, might do something and it might drive me absolutely nuts. And I'll say, be patient, Beth, be accepting. This is not a big deal. You can take care of this chore or whatever. Except that then it keeps happening. And then I really hate it, and I start to resent doing the chore. And now there's no more, "Hey, do you mind when you do X if you could follow up with Y?" Then it becomes, "Why the hell do you keep leaving the cheese grater in the cabinet where the pots go?" Right? Or
Right.
something. Obviously, I'm
Yep.
just giving a stupid example, but,
Right.
and then when you go to then it becomes this confrontation instead of just like, "Hey, do you mind?" Like, for me, it's what's challenging for me is that I'm home at work. So when I go downstairs and the kitchen is in disarray, like the drain board is full, there's crap on the counter, there's the dishwasher is full and unemptied. Like, I have a really hard time functioning, even though my office is upstairs.
Same, same, same,
And it's just like,
same.
do you have to leave these things on the counter? We have cabinets and drawers. Can you put these things away? I'm gonna be in trouble after we air this podcast.
Oh, I'm in trouble. By the way, I had more than one family member last weekend tell me that they listen, and I was like, "Oh, it's kind of funny." Oh, did I tell you the story about Danny asking me about mise en place? Did I tell you this?
Oh my god, my husband has been saying mise en place. I'm it's actually a toleration. I wanna strangle Nancy Minoff.
I love it. I love it.
Yes.
So, for those of you who are newer to the podcast, we were talking about our word of the year. There was all kinds of stuff about that. Beth chose hers. I decided not to choose one. I decided to choose a word of the month. My word for the January was mise en place, which means everything in its place. And the other day, sometimes I can be a little messy. The other day, Danny said to me, "What was your word this year?" This is 6 months later, almost, and I said, "I didn't have a word of the year." He goes, "Well, what was your word of the month?" I go, "Well, it started with mise en place," and he just looked around. He's
No.
like, "Oh, you just used my word against me." At least he's listening. Anyway, so the toleration, yes, we went on a little tangent. So
Sorry,
so,
go
no, so there was a couple of things. You said it leads to confrontation, right? Now think about with your kids. Think
on.
about the little tolerations with your kids,
Oh, yeah.
and you let it go, let it go, and let it go, and part of that is part of parenting,
Yes.
and then you blow up, and what do you think the kid remembers?
That he blew up, of course.
Right,
Of
right. They
course.
don't remember that they did it 75 times.
Right.
Yeah. So the reason why this came up again is so I had a situation that was the result of several years of tolerations where it came to a head, and it was a little annoyance. And okay, I let this go on for years, and I kept accepting these little excuses that weren't really resonating. I wasn't really buying it. And it went on and on and on and on until finally it blew up. And it blew up. And I remember I was talking to Beth about it. she said something. She said, "This is the kind of thing that chips away at your relationship." And that kind of stopped me in my tracks because I was like, okay, yes, it does. Because the toleration grew into such massive resentment that it became a significant problem. And I don't have anybody to blame but myself for that because I tolerated it.
Mm.
And I I did not express my feelings. I did not express why it was an irritation. I let it lead to to this blow up because I avoided it because I didn't want to deal with it. So the other thing is, why are you tolerating it?
Yes.
And what's the cost if you continue to tolerate it?
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think too that, if somebody's in this situation, you have to look at how is it making you feel that is really stirring the pot of like anger for you? Do you feel dismissed? Do you feel insulted, ignored, not taken seriously? All of those things. Like you can only deal with that for so long before you turn around and say whatever it is you need to say. And then usually I think that person would be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." Maybe
Like,
that's
what's
not
the big deal? What's the big
right.
deal? Right? Well,
You
you never said anything. Well, yeah, I kind of did, but right,
right.
right,
Nor
so,
should I have had to.
right, right. So the question is, because I think we talked about this over Voxer, is it a real issue? No, this was the I'm not responsible for that. Is it a minor irritation or is it loaded and you don't want to deal with it? Therefore, you continue to tolerate and tolerate and tolerate. What are you avoiding
Right,
by the toleration? There has to be some kind of payoff. So what's the payoff? Is the payoff you don't have to deal with it? Is the payoff you don't have to admit that blah blah blah? Go back to the weight example. Is the payoff that I can continue to just do whatever I want and have no accountability? Yeah. And at work. So you brought up a good point about resenteeism. Do you wanna bring that in?
oh, about feeling resentful?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you said yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if somebody is doing something and you're tolerating it, but you are feeling resentful, can you really be resentful of that person because you haven't spoken and communicated directly and respectfully about where your boundaries are? Mhm.
Boundaries.
Oh, we got that. Yep, we're gonna have that coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, are you not respecting yourself? Are you not respecting your own boundaries? So who is it you should be resenting? Should you be upset with yourself that you're not taking care of yourself?
Mhm,
I mean,
mhm.
you can be mad at everybody if you want,
Right,
but
right,
you
right.
have to decide, am I gonna take care of it?
100%, and that was part of the issue with my big situation was that I I let it happen. I tolerated it and tolerated it and tolerated it. And frankly, looking back, I think that was irresponsible of me because if it was that big of a deal that it led to a seismic storm, then ho it's my job to communicate what's happening, right? Like, that's just because you don't wanna deal with it, you can't not wanna deal with it and
Right,
then go be mad when somebody doesn't change the behavior. Like,
right.
doesn't work like that.
Yeah, and it's
Yeah.
so much easier to be like, "Can't they just stop doing this thing?" Or "Can't they change how they're doing this thing?" Like, "Don't they see that this isn't the best way? Don't they see that this is bothering me?" No.
Mhm.
ESP, very few of us have ESP. Those who do, you lucky devils.
Lucky devils, lucky. You gave an example of it wasn't AA meetings, it was COAA meetings or something?
ACOA, yes.
ACOA? You
Yeah.
yeah, can you share that with the Podsters? I thought this was very,
Yes.
cool.
So, long story short, I hope, my dad was an alcoholic and took me to AA meetings as a kid from the time I was like 11 to 18. I couldn't be at home, it wasn't safe. And when I moved to Boston, I loved going. In fact, when I drove and I was independent, I used to go all the time. And then when I came to Boston, I thought, I really miss that. Can I find that sense of community again. And so I went to an ACOA meeting, which is an adult children of alcoholics meeting. And I didn't really want to go to Al-Anon. I don't know. I wasn't feeling it. And so I went to this ACOA meeting. I chose Cambridge. I thought this will be a really kind of diverse and interesting group. And people go there, of course, to deal with if they have a parent who's an alcoholic. And I stopped going pretty quickly. I mean, like, I don't know. I didn't go for a year. I mean, maybe I went for 6 months. I had made a friend there. And so we would meet there. And that became my ticket for why I would go. But I realized, like, these people keep coming back because the situation is not coming to an end, and they
Right.
have to learn to tolerate it. And I was like, "I am out of here." Like, I heard the craziest things in AA meetings as a kid, but people took action, and you went there because you wanted to stop drinking, not because somebody else was in your life drinking and you couldn't control it. And I wanted the action. I wanted the action. I didn't wanna, like, still be going 20 years later and talking about what I was still tolerating.
Tolerating. Right. Wow, that's a big one. That's a big
Yeah.
one.
And I didn't realize it at the time exactly, but I actually ran into somebody recently who I had met there and said to me, "Oh, I'm still going." We're going back over 30 years. And I'm thinking to myself, "Oh my gosh," like, I don't know. They'd have to admit me.
So why do you think people in that situation, and if every situation's different, why do you think there was so much tolerating going on?
Well, I mean,
Love?
I think
Fear?
love I think people went there to vent to other people at similar situations. When you are not happy with a parent, especially if you're a woman and you're complaining about your mother or venting, I don't mean complaining. People who don't have the same situation, they don't get it. They don't get it. They're like, "But it's your mom or it's your dad. Like, why do you talk about them that way? Or why do you?" And they just don't understand. Again, talk about chipping away at a relationship. I mean, alcoholism chips away at relationships rather
Mhm.
quickly.
Mm.
So I think that that's it. Is they want to go where other people understand that. Yeah, you don't really want to be venting about this anymore, but it's difficult and it sucks, and you want people who understand.
Right. So my question for you is you said, I don't want to be here 30 years from now. I'm not going to tolerate this. So why do you think some people tolerate it? What you would not?
Well, I mean, I think I'm definitely an outlier here. I mean, I got to a point where I decided I just could not be connected to my mother anymore. I just couldn't.
Oh,
I was just not going to have it for my children. There was no benefit from the relationship. And that's a really, really hard cord to cut. I only have met maybe one or two other people who have done it. And I actually don't talk about it often. I don't tell people because I know it's really hard for people to understand why you would do something like that. And some people just can't cut the cord, and that's fine. I totally respect that.
yeah. Yeah, so it sounds like it was your children.
Yeah, I
You
just
were
didn't
like, this is
you're
yeah,
right, it's just toxic. There was nothing that was not toxic
yeah,
about it.
yep, yep. So you put the safety and happiness of your children,
Yeah, and my
that is
family.
what
I
said
mean,
I
it wouldn't have been good for me either. I would not
right,
have been a good parent.
right, right. Yeah. So that's a very oversimplified, because that's obviously very complex, example of tolerations and
Mm.
what would have happened if you continued to tolerate that behavior, right?
Right.
That I mean, woo, that's a big one.
That was heavy. That was a boulder, all right.
That was a boulder. That was not a grain of sand.
Nope.
It was not but that was over how many years, right? Like the
Yeah,
sand.
very
Yeah.
true.
Oof. Well, thank you for sharing that. That
My pleasure. Happy to help
yeah.
someone else if I can.
Oof. So, what's the call to action to our podsters on this one? I want to bring it back to the corporate world and yeah. Oh my god, so many examples. So many examples. If you're tolerating a toxic environment, it is changing you. And we've talked about this before. We've talked about with bad bosses, with our bad bosses episode. The more you tolerate it, the more it seeps into every area of your life, I would say. So that's an area where you definitely want to take a look at what you're tolerating. And yeah, that's, I mean, yeah.
Yeah, just don't do it. Rip off the Band-Aid, kids. Rip off the Band-Aid.
Rip off the Band-Aid, lots of boundary examples. We have 2, perhaps 3 boundary episodes. Just search on boundaries in our listing out of our, like, 55, I think, episodes that we have now. Do you believe that?
I know it. Who thought? Who
Who
thought? Here we
thought?
go a year later.
A year later.
Yep.
Happy anniversary.
Happy anniversary to you too, sweetie.
So, I just gave her a big smile back, everybody. Yeah, so be mindful of what you're tolerating. We're not saying to go blow up your life, but we're saying, keep in mind that it adds up and make sure it's not something that could turn into a big deal.
Don't let it suck the life out of you.
Yeah. All right, we got lots of cool episodes coming up because summer's here. I have
Woohoo.
summeritis. We are going to be talking about boundaries. We're going to be talking about how to thrive. We are going to be talking about allyship. We are going to be talking about letting go of what does no longer serves you.
Serves us.
That's
Who
a
like a
good one.
toleration? Take care of it.
We are going to be talking about, did I say women and money?
You did not.
Women and money.
Women and money.
Yeah, we got a lot. We got a lot coming. So stay tuned, Podsters. Share it with a friend.
Yeah, definitely share it with a friend because you know someone in the
Who's
toleration box.
tolerating.
Yeah,
You too. Mhm. Why does she put up with that? How many times have you said that?
that's true. Very true.
Share this episode as a passive aggressive way of getting them to stop tolerating it.
Right. Excellent point.
And on that note, we
It's a
out. It's a wrap.
peace
Peace
out.
out, Podsters.